And to that end, I'm delighted to kick off today by introducing a panel of B2B marketers who will share how they are making their marketing decisions today, including where dollars are going and why, and what they want from their media partners. Our panelists this morning include Rebecca Carr, CMO of CenturyLink Technology Solutions, Mason Power, CMO of iLevel Solutions, and Russ Glass, CEO and founder of Bizzo, and our moderator today, Tom Stein, CEO of agency Stein IAS. Please give them a round of applause.
Good morning. How's everyone doing today? Good, great. I have been a friend of ABM's for pretty much my entire career. And Mike, thank you for the opportunity for myself and the panelists to address everyone this morning. I've been a consumer of B2B media, so information, media, other marketing assets that B2B publishers have provided through the years, and I also have this. I'm old enough to actually say this, that I've lived through a sort of the tectonic transition that's happened to the marketing industry and the media industry, and I have a pretty, I think, solid perspective of what was, what is, and to some extent, what will be, and I think that some of that will come out really in the words of the panelists today. So I'm excited to be here, excited to have this conversation. We want to be as candid as we possibly can with you, because I think that's how we'll be as helpful and constructive as we can. And so I'll have a couple of introductory comments, but before I do that, what I'd like to do is ask the panelists to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do and why they're here today. So, Becky, do you want to start?
Great. Thank you very much. Becky Carr, CMO of CenturyLink Technology Solutions, recently rebranded in January from Savvis Communications. It's in the small, unassuming industry of cloud computing. And my experience has been in the technology and hosting and telecom industry for more years than I care to admit. It's a really incredibly exciting industry, and an opportunity over the last 13 months to really transform their marketing organization and frankly bring it into the 20th century. We've made incredible strides partnering with Tom. And frankly, I'm really excited to speak with you. A significant portion of our budget and value that we garner in terms of driving leads in the business is through your channel. So thank you.
That's worth a round of applause, right? Russ Glass, CEO and founder of Bizzo. We're a B2B audience targeting platform. We help marketers measure, reach, and engage B2B audiences more effectively at every stage of their funnel. And I've been on the board of ABM for probably about almost 2 years now. Think that the opportunity as an organization to really help both the publishers as well as marketers communicate more effectively together and bring all of our businesses to the next level is we're at a great inflection point right now, and excited to be here to talk about it.
Mason Power, I'm the CMO at iLevel, which is not yet a household name, but working on it. Our industry, we spun out of the Blackstone Group, and we serve Blackstone and other very large and medium-sized private equity firms. We sell cloud-based enterprise software. So our category of software is new, and we're the market leader at this point and trying to gain tons of market share. And again, this is a B2B media is a primary for events and online, et cetera. Primary way for us to brand ourselves in front of new people and grow our business. So thanks for having us.
So I thought it would be interesting. Becky comes from quite a large organization, and so we have a large enterprise represented on the panel. Mason, from 3 or 4 years into the trajectory of that company, so a smaller company but fast growing, and I thought it'll be a different perspective and a valuable one for you. And then Russ kind of sits in the middle in terms of working with marketers, working with B2B publishers, and has, I think, a perspective that's great because it goes in both directions, and I think that'll come through today. So with all that said, let's get started. And a little bit of context. So a few things that I think are clear is that owned media, branded content, increasingly prevalent in the world, increasingly prevalent in our worlds, all of our worlds. I think that's quite obvious. The needs of brands, marketers, and agencies have changed rapidly and are changing all the time. And I think a lot of what we can talk about today is whether our needs are aligned with your offerings to a certain extent and your perspectives. Also that I think business media brands, there's a sense that there's been a struggle, and I think there has been a struggle over the past number of years to maintain relevance in a more fragmented environment, maintain relevance to readers and viewers and users, maintain relevance to the marketing community in the face of so much digitally driven transformation. And then I think there's signs of rebound and energy, and I don't know if everyone shares that in this room, but I saw the ABM study recently, Mike, of 5% growth in 2013 in terms of revenue, and that's all good, and it's good news for us. We need media partners to be strong and vibrant and innovative and all those things. So I'm going to ask a question, and please, anyone at pretty much at any time, if you want to interject a comment or an add-on question, we want to make this interactive, have it be a discussion. So we'll have a little Q&A at the end, but if you have a particular question of anyone on the panel, please just pop up and ask that question. So I'm going to start, in this case, with Becky. And Becky, in your view, what is the role that B2B media should play in terms of meeting your needs and expectations as the leader of your marketing organization?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, as the CMO, my ultimate objective is to drive sourced opportunities into the business. And now with the evolution of marketing automation, there's a lot of ways to hold us accountable for that and measure it effectively. From a media perspective, ultimately my objective is to drive leads, and that therefore the expectation is to deliver qualified leads. Certainly that there's a lot of opportunity to do that. What I would say is there's an opportunity to be more of a trusted partner. So rather than, I feel like it's a tactical relationship today, and there's so much information and knowledge and expertise that you have that I think to really advance, our collective opportunity to be able to leverage some of the data that you have to make us more effective, ultimately with the goal of driving qualified leads to the business is where I think it stands.
So one quick follow-on question that I have is if you could talk a little bit about what accountability means at CenturyLink and the opportunities, challenges, pressures that creates for you and your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, accountability. Back in the day, marketing at every quarter would present their results, and it would be pretty pictures and ads. And now my scorecard is an Excel spreadsheet. It's all metric based from the top of the funnel on down. It's improving conversion rates. There is absolute accountability within my organization and how people get bonus based on not only the number of leads, but the quality of the leads and the value. We have committed to 20% sourcing of opportunities within the business, and this is multi-millions of dollars globally, and influencing 50%.
That's accountability.
Yeah.
Mason, do you want to talk about expectations in this evolving world that we try to do business in?
Sure. It's for us, and it's all about people. And we've moved in our first market segment to great brand awareness, and people are aware of a problem and that we exist to solve it, and that's terrific. But how many people am I bringing through the door. We measure it not in number of people who visit our website and things like that. It's what about this firm? How are we doing with these types of firms? And who are the big decision makers? It's an average of 8 to 10 people buy our software or sponsor it or evaluate. So it's all about people. And to the extent that I can, my accountability is showing and demonstrating the velocity of people going from the stage where they're known all the way through to the fact that they're in the pipeline. How many? What's the conversion rate? How many of those are sales accepted? How many of those close? What is the velocity of marketing sourced versus non-marketing sourced? It's really, for me, and I think most people, it's about people. And when we interact with B2B media, it tends to be, I need to remind people of that during the beginning of the meeting to say, I'm talking about people. I'm not looking at space or time. I'm looking at people.
Okay. So Russ, working both sides of that fence, what are your observations, and what do you think the expectations are that you, in your interactions with clients and your interactions with the B2B media partners as well, how does that all play out?
So, first thing is, this is very consistent with what we see out there, which is that marketers today are looking for visibility, right? They're looking to understand, who they're reaching at a more and more granular level. They're looking to understand just how valuable those audiences are at a more and more, granular level. And then ultimately, how does that affect all of the pipeline metrics that they're then putting in front of their CEOs to get more budget or to show why what they're doing is effective. That's a consistency across everything. I see varying but generally pretty poor levels of visibility provided by media to marketers. So I think there's a pretty significant disconnect between what marketers are doing and what they want and what media is providing to marketers today to try to tie that together. So
I want to make a particularly provocative statement, and at least I think it's provocative. So it was in a conversation I had yesterday. It was brought up, and it stuck with me. And it was that there's a whole generation of B2B marketing, or the generation of B2B marketing has moved ahead significantly, and that the B2B media hasn't quite caught up with that. And so that's a big statement and provocative. After Cinco de Mayo, I don't want to be the buzzkill this morning or anything like that. But, it came up in conversation, and I wanted to ask the panelists, and I'm going to start with Mason this time. Is that overstatement, actual, understatement?
No, I think it's spot on. When we interact with B2B media, I kid you not, I have people telling me, "Oh, well, we're online now. We're not just print and shows." And okay, that's great, good for you. But what about where we are with our world of tracking through automation and others, tracking where people are through our funnel? What can you do to track people going through your site, and how can we connect those two things? So I just feel like it's a good 3 to 5 years behind where we are as consumers, if you will, buyers, and where some of the people that I work with are in terms of being suppliers.
Becky, your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think the relationship between media and marketing is dissimilar to B2B marketing in general. It used to be years ago that marketing was about serving up a product, enabling the sales organization to deliver knowledge to a client about a particular solution and why it was better. And now there's so much opportunity for the clients to get really smart before they even call someone in the door. So they know exactly what they want. They've done their research. Now it's incumbent upon any salesperson or any opportunity to put it in the context of how it's going to drive the business. And that's where I see an opportunity for media partners to move, as I would describe it, beyond the tactics and really into the solutions and thought leadership that's going to enable our mutual success.
So before, Russ, I'm going to ask you to respond, but in a particular context, because do you think that what Becky just said is worth challenging? And here's a perspective on that. So Becky said, we want media partners to put solutions on the table, not tactics. And that makes sense on a lot of levels. In your experience, do you think agencies or clients are really ready for solutions, or that they say they want them, but ultimately they want to break them down and regress them back into tactics?
So, yeah, there's a few different questions in there, right? On the readiness side of this, I would say that most media organizations, my organization included, is very responsive, and versus being proactive, right? And so what I mean by that is we respond to a bunch of RFPs. By the time you get to the RFP stage, the ability to actually affect strategy is over, right? And it's been over for 6 months. So, the agency organization today has largely been structured, in my mind, to spit out RFPs, get RFPs back, and you're totally in a tactical mode at that point. So, the challenge that I've put on my organization and that I think other media organizations have to put on their organizations is a much more strategic conversation much earlier with the agency at a more senior level, with the marketer at a more senior level, as to let's affect strategy, let's talk strategy, and affect what those RFPs look like at an earlier stage, right? So that's, I think, one side of this, is that those strategic conversations have to happen, and it's a two-way conversation, right? The second is, though, that I think the point about the buyer's journey having changed dramatically is a critical one for us all to understand, right? This is no longer a world where the sales team in B2B is driving revenue, right? It's now the marketing organization that's driving revenue. And that means there's a tremendous opportunity, first of all, because all these dollars are going to flow out of different organizations into the marketing organization over the next decade. So you're going to see tremendous growth in marketing spend in B2B. The question is then, okay, how do we strategically tackle that? How do we provide solutions for the marketers that enable them to be in the conversation with these audiences much earlier, educate them much earlier, understand what's working and what's not so they can improve over time and report on those dashboards to their CEOs what's working?
So you've said the two words perhaps of the day for all of us on this panel, and I'm sure that there are things that the people in the audience are thinking about quite a lot. Buyer journey, and how in the course of really a couple of years, driven by marketing automation and other technology platforms and the various marketing clouds, Adobe is a sponsor. They've got one. Eloqua has one. Oracle. Their Silverpop was just acquired. I mean, on and on and on it goes. But how is this changing the game for us as marketers, and what does it mean in terms of challenge and opportunity for the B2B media partners? And Mason, do you want to take that first?
Long question.
Sorry, I'll keep them shorter.
No, I think in terms of buyer journey and the where B2B media could align themselves. Think about what Russ was saying in terms of timing of strategic discussions. I would love to have more people come in and talk to me about their year ahead, our year ahead, and what we could do together. I mean, there's lots of things that I don't have enough of: content, people, leads. And there's nothing I wouldn't do. I would earmark a ton of budget to execute and make myself ready for solutions rather than tactics. And I think as it relates to the buyer journey, if we can align what you know about people's buyer's journey, like there's no one publisher that knows everything about what my buyers are doing. But the more we talk, the more you'll be able to pitch better ideas my way. And the more I share information to you, with you on what we're seeing in terms of trends and who are the types of buyers and who are not, and what's the kind of behavior that tends to lead to good closed opportunities. And that's a strategic discussion. We're working together on it. I tend to still get, here's our editorial calendar, where do you want to slot in? And our rates are up 10%. Something just not helpful like that from some. And others really come through in like August and September and say, hey, you're probably budgeting. What can we do to think about your buyer journey and what we can align our content around?
Okay, Becky?
Yeah, I agree with what Mason said. We are, we are becoming more and more focused on the content and aligning it with the buyer's journey, and we need dynamic solutions to serve that up. Too often I think it falls back on the marketing organization to care for and to identify where they're at in the journey. And I think you have an incredible opportunity with the wealth of big data at your fingertips to really bring some exciting opportunities to us to, I think, frankly, shorten the sales cycle and really get into the, get to the identified, right person at the right time and the right medium. I would be incredibly excited to engage in those kinds of conversations, not only across the journey, but based on the content that you're seeing that works and doesn't work, and topics. Sometimes we fly blind, and I think there's an opportunity to do even more joint content development. We have a little bit bigger budget, I think, than Mason, but we're always constrained, and I think to shorten that cycle in working with you would be really transformative.
Just to add a comment to that, we've heard a lot over the last kind of couple of years about marketers acting more like publishers, right? They're building content teams, they're creating content of their own and distributing that content. I think an interesting mantra might be for publishers, media, to start to act more like marketers, right? And kind of flip that on its head a little bit. And the reason I say that is if you think about what a marketer's doing, they're creating all this content, and that content's designed to both educate that consumer, that prospect that they care about, but also create data for the marketer to segment that audience effectively, right? So they're doing two things with that content, and that's why that content's so valuable. So a piece of content that's designed for awareness is not only creating awareness, but it's also generating data back to the marketer that somebody's in an awareness phase because they're consuming this content. And as you create different forms of content as a marketer, you then instrument that to get all that data back, and it creates this sort of whole cycle to drive people down the funnel. If publishers started to think more like marketers and started to instrument their content and think about content in that way, where are these people in their journey? What kind of content is going to be valuable for them in that journey? And then enable marketers to tap into that data and that insight. That's a tremendous win for, I think I see nodding, but I think that's a tremendous win for marketers across the ecosystem and thus for publishers.
Yeah, and from an agency perspective, I would add that's not threatening to us. So I think it's actually something that would differentiate a media partner to a significant extent, and also embed that partner with us across client engagements more deeply. So I think it would be a huge win, and I think the whole notion of media companies thinking and acting like marketers is probably the point of connection that's really leverageable. So I think that's a great point. So another area that I want to get into, actually, I want to just rewind for just a second. A thought that I had. Some markets, the whole aspect of marketing automation, content marketing, buyer journey, use cases, verticalization, personalization, et cetera, some sectors are more advanced than others, right? So Becky, you're in technology. Technology is probably here in terms of its desire, appetite, proficiency, et cetera. Some other industries are further down in that evolutionary path, but they're on the path for sure. And I think that one of the opportunities for the B2B media partners here is that if you're not in technology where there's a great appetite that exists for this, to be a first mover in an industry, to actually drive that as an opportunity, or be a fast mover in that regard. So I think there's opportunity all up and down the chain of adoption of buyer journey, marketing automation, marketing technology, and the kinds of tools and assets that you can put at our disposal from that standpoint. So another area that we wanted to delve into a little bit is actually very aligned with expectations today, and it's influence. So if we think about where does influence live in our markets today? Does it live with media companies? Does it live with brands that are providing the branded content that we've been talking about? Does it live with bloggers and other industry observers? Does it live with analysts? Has that changed? Is it going to continue to change? And this is I think it's very, very important part of this conversation. And so, again, another long preamble to hopefully a short question. So, where does B2B media exist, or what's the level of influence that it wields in your market, Mason?
I think it's a great opportunity for B2B media to improve. For us, other customers, our existing customers, are by far the biggest influencers, and there is news that comes out in our space. Private equity, and it's a big market, and there's a lot of technology in it. So there are news, but it's largely just regurgitating kind of press releases, and there's occasionally 3, maybe 4 good pieces of commentary, good journalistic pieces of commentary a year. And those are always, in that given month, let's say, the number 1 or number 2 most read on the trade magazine. So I'm always shocked that there's not a little bit more. I think that if you look at what we're putting out, we're putting it out in a variety of different ways. Press releases are not dead, but they're not the only way. We're publishing in social media, in our blog, and through email and other alerts. And you can string it together through a number of different vendors, and I would love to see somebody develop more influence in our industry by trying to read between the lines and doing a little bit more, acting maybe a little bit more like an analyst. We don't yet have analysts focusing in our niche, and it's a great vacuum. And I actually think the B2B media could fill that vacuum, and that would really align our whole, our buyer journey with them significantly.
So, Russ, what are your thoughts on where does influence exist in the media world? Does it exist to the same extent? Is it changing?
Yeah, so it's changing for sure. I think influence is vastly more distributed than it was even 5 years ago. And to Mason's point, we hear consistently that the primary influencers are, current successful clients. And the fact that they have a voice now that they never had before, right? So whether it be through social media or other online outlets. Twitter is just such a great example of something that didn't exist 5 years ago that gives the buyer a huge voice and influence on, one tweet from a great customer of ours is much more valuable than just about anything else we can do, right, in today's day and age. So it's definitely more distributed. I don't think that means, though, that B2B media is left out in the cold. I think that B2B media is an aggregation source of influence, right? And by having a powerful brand and using that brand to bring influence together, events is a great example where I think it's still a primary channel for B2B to be successful, is bringing these influencers together in a way you can connect live and you can connect in an environment that allows for deeper levels of discussion. But again, instrumenting that, providing visibility into that, and helping marketers measure that will will help drive that.
Becky.
Yeah. You know, I really see the role much more delivering on awareness, which is certainly incredibly important and a more important channel for a company like ours who maybe doesn't spend as much from an advertising perspective. I absolutely agree. Existing customers are top influencers, and then it's the analyst community. We're in an interesting industry in cloud computing, and you hear about the big three all the time. And there's a whole slew of, number 4, which we happen to be on down, and trying to, make our way into the conversation and leverage, all of the social channels beyond it, is an uphill battle for us. We have to fight, harder and harder for the content and to get in there. Last week was the first time we made an announcement via a blog post and not through a press release, which was always, kind of traditional. We had had embargoed a number of journalists and we doubled our social followers in one day as a result of it. It took a lot of work and getting a lot of people on board, but that, there's, you can't associate a price to the value that brings, and really just getting out into the conversation. Again, it's around awareness. I think there are certain media outlets with really strong influencers, particularly in our industry, and it's an area that I've dedicated a lot of resources really building those relationships to make sure that we're at the forefront and part of those conversations.
So there's I think a sense in our community that given all of the tumult of the past few years, that that publishing in general, media companies in general, they've lost some of the journalistic muscle, and maybe that was an economic necessity. Do you think that's recoverable, Becky?
Oh, I absolutely do. I think the challenge for you and your business is just the pace of activity that needs to happen. Publishing online and needing new content every couple of hours to command your audience is a challenge I don't envy by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that we've lost some of that journalistic creativity, and that's an area that I think again companies like ours would love to partner to kind of help push that forward.
I would love to see more kind of op-ed. We were talking about different publications, and the journal op-ed is widely read. It's an institution in and of itself. I would love to go to a conference and have a trade publisher get up and review something kind of meaty. Just break a story at the conference and explain it. Have a whole session on it. I think that would be fabulous. It would really be great to have the people who write the stories become influencers. It's their byline. It's awfully small. It's just this, and there's some of them who are terrific. I would love to see those people supported, and whatever we can do to help with that process, we'd love to do that.
So, Russell, I'll ask this question of you, and maybe Becky, you can follow up on it. But, I think of some of the folks that I know in the industry, our collective industry. So, I'm sure some of the people in this room know Bob Evans. For years, he was the editor-in-chief of Information Week. So he goes back to the CMP days and the UBM days and all of those things. And now he's the chief content fellow at Oracle, right? And so he's gone to Oracle, and he's in a very senior executive role there, being their publisher, if you will, being their voice, their editorial voice, and so on. And I could point at many other examples of that existing. In our company, we have someone who runs our content practice. It used to be the general manager and editor-in-chief of TechWeb. So, That's a significant change that's gone on over the last few years. And so I'm going to start with Russ. How does B2B media coexist with the people who are acting as the publishers on the client side?
Yeah, well, again, I think that goes back to thinking more like marketers, right? So if marketers are going to think more like publishers, publishers need to think more like marketers. We followed the same playbook. We hired Sean Callahan, who a lot of you know, was at Crane's B2B forever, long time, and we hired him to run editorial for us. And it's interesting, if you talk to Sean, what he'll tell you is, I can, even though there's a perspective that I am now coming from, I actually feel like I'm creating more meaty content today than I was then, because I have more flexibility and I don't have the same pressures that I had then, which was produce a certain amount of content in a certain amount of time, right? And you have time, you have quality, right? I think a lot of the problems that we see today is that there are fewer resources, there's less time, and so quality goes down. If now a Sean could work in conjunction with a B2B media set of outlets to co-produce content, to have strategy aligned around what we're looking for and what the media organization can bring to the table, if we can instrument some of the capabilities we have on the publisher side to help us more effectively measure what's working, right? All of that could go into a more collaborative partnership.
Mason, you have a thought?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we write as marketers tends to be kind of uninspiring and kind of safe, because every time I put something out there, whether it's a salesperson or account manager or CEO or board member, somebody is worried about who's going to react negatively, and that's going to somehow ruin our revenue for the following year. And so, it's so difficult for us to go out and speak our mind under our brand as a corporate blog even. And I don't know whether you do, and with Sean, I'd certainly take a look, but or Becky, how you do it. But working with having our content and the content of the trade media, B2B media can say things that I can't.
Yeah, no, I actually hired a woman a short while ago who is got incredible relationships amongst a number of key press and analysts. And in the past couple of months, we've seen our share of voice increase 2%, which is pretty significant, and our position in some of the analyst reports elevate. So, to me, it comes down to personal relationships, right? And similar to hiring, publishers, I've brought on someone who has those relationships in such a way that we're actually partnering with a couple of media outlets to create those more controversial or thought-provoking assets. But 6 months ago, no one would listen to me. So you do have to, it does come down to people.
So we talked about buyer journey, we've talked about influence, we've talked about content and points of view and how content flows back and forth from publisher to marketer and so on. I want to ask a question now about innovation. And I want to ask each of you, and Russ, if you probably have a pretty good answer for this one, but have you seen examples of innovation? Do you feel media partners are being innovative in terms of putting offerings, ideas, solutions in front of you that are exciting, that are compelling, that are differentiated? Mason, do you want to take that one to start, and then we'll let Russ go?
I am. I'm seeing it in conferences more than online. I think our media partners are thinking about how to shake up and keep their conferences not the same thing with the same people, same agenda year after year. And the format of the discussions and the interactive nature with the audience and then the follow-ups around that, I think are really strong. I haven't seen it as much online, but I'm really enthused about the innovation in conferences, which doesn't seem like the most innovative area of work.
Russ, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that we're trying to push the envelope in terms of innovation, but when I look out there across the different media organizations, a few examples that I think are interesting actually all relate to sort of the measurement side of this. So, that you can't improve what you don't measure, right? And I think that the most innovative publishers, I think Forbes is doing a really interesting job in terms of how they're instrumenting and providing measurement to marketers on what's working, what's not, and being incredibly transparent around helping the marketer understand where their dollars are going and making improvements based on that. I think IDG continues to do a great job in a similar vein, a little bit more upstream, allowing for really robust targeting of audiences and then measurement as to what's driving effectiveness. So, it's happening for sure, and we would just love to see that become more distributed.
Becky?
Yeah, I agree with everything Russ said. I think there's been, certainly a significant shift and a lot of innovation that's happened over just the last 2 years. But again, more and more transparency, more and more insights that the marketer can glean from the data that you have that allows us to be much more effective is really where I see the opportunity. And I do see movement there. The two outlets that you mentioned are companies that we're frankly concentrating a lot of investment because we are able to measure and frankly deliver qualified leads as a result of it. And we talked a little bit about events. I guess I would, in my industry, I don't see the impact or the value of events as they used to be 5-10 years ago, and therefore a much more significant share of my budget. I saw Tom, I think, a study of where B2B marketers are investing, and I think we're a little outside the norm. A lot more of my budget is going toward online and primarily syndicated content versus events.
So Russ, what's your take on where the investment is flowing? So Becky, syndication, other digital formats and outlets. How about yourself?
Yeah, so actually we're just finalizing a survey which talks to this a little bit. And it hasn't been published yet, and results are still being tallied. But 400 or 500 marketers or something like that have responded and have said that their investment, first of all, is going into marketing automation. So 70% are going to increase their investment in marketing automation. When you break that down, what's kind of interesting is when you ask them then, well, how are they segmenting their audiences? How do they want to segment their audiences to be effective with marketing automation? Like 70%, the vast majority say we're going to use online behaviors, or we're using online behaviors to do that. So that's one really interesting insight, which is that publishers and media providers have more information about online behavior than anybody. And if they can provide that effectively to marketers, there's a big, I think, opportunity in budget flow. The second sort of largest cut of this is the demographics, so giving insight into who these people are, whether it be from a title perspective or an industry perspective. And then the third, it was where are they in the sales sort of buying process. So, with just those three cuts, if we can create more transparency and more targetability, I think there's a very big budget flow opportunity.
Okay. Mason, you have a perspective?
Yeah, I'm squarely in that 70%. It's never an end state with marketing automation and using inbound, outbound, all kinds of direct email interaction, and it's accelerating our ability to generate quality leads at an accelerating rate. So my budget is similarly accelerating.
Okay, so I want to ask perhaps a summary question, and I'm going to the question I'm going to ask is that if you were to bucket the B2B media companies and entities that you work with, and there's a bucket that is exemplary, they're over-delivering against your expectations. There's a bucket that's good, that they do a pretty good job in that regard. And then there's a bucket that's not as good, that is less than exemplary, that's average, if you will. I'm going to ask each of you to give me a percentage for those and explain a little bit why. But I'm going to do something else first, and I'd actually like to ask if anyone in the room cares to and is brave enough to tell us what you're about to hear. So what do you think we're going to tell you in terms of percentage exemplary, percentage good, percentage average? Does anyone want to take a shot at that? Anybody? Somebody?
Okay, I'll try it. I think maybe 1% is exemplary. I'd say maybe 5% are doing pretty good, and I'd say the rest are about average.
Wow. Okay.
Well, we're not going to offend anybody, I guess.
No. I was trying to take some of the heat out of this, but you just killed it. Anyone else have a different point of view? That gentleman?
This gentleman says 10 to 15% exemplary. The majority, maybe 50, 60%, good job. And I'm not really sure how you define the, I guess average being the remainder. So let's go 15, 60, and 25. Okay.
So now I'm going to ask our panelists. So we had that's better than was posited from person back at the back of the room. So I'm going to put us on the spot now, and I'm going to start with Mason.
So again, in my industry, events tend to be actually really helpful, and I'm seeing about a third. So that's a really good number in terms of grades relative to the benchmarks there. But then when I look at all the other ways that I can partner with B2B media to increase brand awareness and understanding of the underlying problem and drive leads, particularly, it's a little bit more in line with the naysayer over there. But I would say there's about 5 to 10% that are doing an awesome job in all those different areas, and then I think the rest are entirely average and not thinking.
Becky?
Yeah, I would say 10% in the exemplary, 20 in good, and 70 in average. And I think those exemplary, and we've got really high standards, again, all with the premise of delivering transparency, being a strategic partner in defining opportunities to really take our brand and our influence to the next level. There are very few of those partners, and certainly, as we uncover them, I'll tell you more and more of our budget's going to shift right there.
Russ, do you have a point of view? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I mean, am I grading this on a curve or just?
However you want to grade it, you grade it.
I think, if I'm not grading this on a curve, I would say everybody has room for improvement, right? I would say that, it's actually probably 60, 70% good, no exemplary, everybody can improve, and 30-40% average. But I think there is a broad swath of good and trying, and but I don't see much exemplary out there.
So I have a question for the audience, and I don't know if you want to directly answer it or have some give and take around it with the panelists, but so I surveyed our media folks and the people engaged with you, and similar percentages. So I'm not going to report ours because it's right in line with what most folks are saying. Why are so few exemplary? Is it the economics of the business today? Is it the pace of change and transition and the inflection points that we've been talking about? And again, I don't necessarily know if anyone wants to raise their hand and take a pass at this, but we want exemplary, right? Or certainly we want the high end of good. And we have mostly not exemplary, mostly good to average. And so that means there's not that much differentiation. That means there's commoditization. That means things become price-led, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like to actually ask you guys, why is there so little exemplary out there? Okay, so moving on. I'm sorry.
We saw a couple.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to answer it and ask a question along with it. So I think one of the reasons there's less than exemplary is the types of conversations you were talking about, those earlier strategic conversations, are not happening that often. And so if they don't happen that often, the vendors, the media companies aren't going to be able to develop those type of programs. So that's why I think it's less than. My question is, so if you desire those type of earlier on strategic partnership questions, but at the same time you're being bombarded by lots of us trying to contact you and schedule meetings, those that have gotten through, how did they go about doing it? If you didn't have an existing relationship, how did they get in that door to engage and get a seat at the table early on?
Anyone want to take that? Becky, do you?
I think you're probably better served answering it, since most of my media decisions come through your organization, and we rely on you to establish those relationships.
So I think that it's it's not dissimilar than how marketers have to approach their clients or prospective clients. I think it has to do with putting something provocative in front of us. Maybe it's a piece of content, I don't know, but it's a point of view, it's a perspective, something that it provokes us to think different. So to think different about what we're doing on behalf of our clients, and that provokes us to think different about you strategically and you in terms of what your offerings are in a strategic context. And I think that it's not that frequent that someone tries to actually reach out and aggressively provoke us from that standpoint. That's I know that's a very general response to that, but that's how I would summarize it.
I would throw in lead with your data stats. If you can come to me and say, I've got people at these firms, or this kind of numbers of people in your industry at least, and I'd like you to consider kind of a small budget to try. I mean, that's an easy meeting to have. You've come to me with something very relevant that I can kind of sink my teeth into.
The other thing I would add to that, and I know we have another question here, is just that this is, generally speaking, not a salesperson, right, that should be having this conversation. Or at least it's a more senior salesperson that can have this conversation toe-to-toe with a marketer or with an agency and start to talk more strategically. And I think that's one of the problems that we face. It's one of the problems I think a lot of organizations face, is that the wrong people are having these conversations.
But how do you get started at the strategy? That's critical. Not when you get into the RFP, as you said earlier. How do you start that meeting with strategy sessions, data, information, all the other assets that
I would begin to answer that by saying due diligence. You have to do due diligence about exactly what we're trying to accomplish, what our competitive situation is, and what your view of market dynamics, and put all of that together into something that's, again, provocative and actionable for us. That's what we would do with one of our clients. And I think that the media can approach us in a similar way and will be differentiated if they can do it. But it's a bit of a heavy lift, right? So I think it's continuing the shift from transactional selling to strategic selling. And that's something that many of our clients' businesses are struggling with and going through. Becky is in the process of leading that transformation at her company. But I think it's about the intimacy with what we're trying to accomplish, the intimacy with the situation that enables you to be more relevant. And through relevance comes differentiation.
I hate to be come back to events a lot, but when I start my budgeting, I have to think about fixed things, right? What do I have to bake in? We run a user conference. I've got these events that are must attend. Okay, so those are my fixed numbers. Maybe there's a little negotiating room on those types of things, and that lays out my year. And then I start to think, when is my next software release going to be? Things that I'm contributing. And that's my calendar. And so my spend is directly correlated around my calendar. And I then have to kind of figure out, am I overloading myself in a specific time? Okay, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. So a little bit of process of elimination there. But if somebody were to sit down and say, let's compare calendars, not editorial calendar in July, we're going to have an issue about this or that, but rather, what are you thinking that you could accomplish at our event in January? What can you do here? How could we build up to it, follow up? All of a sudden, you're in a highly strategic discussion.
Yeah, I had a publisher email me quite recently. Publishers never email me. They email my media folks and other people, but I very rarely, except at events like this, have these kinds of conversations at a high level. And he had something pretty important to tell me about one of the markets that we have a client that is very, very active in. And it almost took me by surprise that there was an outreach to me. And I responded, and we're having lunch. So that's a good thing, right? That's the beginning of a strategic conversation. But there was value exchange going on there, and I appreciated the outreach. We only have
there's a few questions.
I'm sorry. Go for it.
If I could propose one answer and also ask a question. That is, I think publishers, media companies are optimized for delivering product and short-term results, and you're asking for long-term custom solutions, right? So here's the question. If mostly we're looked at for paid and not your owned and earned, with the amount of investment in marketing automation, are you willing to look at us as partners for your owned and for running marketing automation? As we know, there's nothing automated about marketing automation, so the burdens of marketing departments has to be tremendous, right? So are you willing to look at us for those sort of solutions as well?
I would say that we're willing to, but there's a bit of a credibility gap that you have to cross. So marketing automation is, and all of the technology-enabled marketing that goes on is fiercely granular. It's fiercely time-consuming, and if you get it right, there's a huge payback. But it's hard, and having partners that can help us in that regard is huge. So I would say if you can prove it, or you put a strong value prop in front of us, we would definitely entertain it.
Tom?
Yes.
Hi. Tom, I don't know your agency, but I would, and I can't speak for all publishers, but I would say that I speak to a lot of publishers, and we mostly try to avoid agencies because as far as the exemplary best and good, agencies generally won't talk strategy. They want you to fill in blanks. Most blanks don't even match what we have. So there's very few agencies, so we try to talk to the marketers. And what I thought was interesting, Mason, you said you weren't yet a household name or as well known as you hope to be. And I wonder, with all the metrics and dashboards that we've been talking about, by the way, great provocative panel, how much you believe in or subscribe to branding beyond content. For example, Becky, will you ever be buying ads from Bizzo? Do you believe in advertising as a branding
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you measure branding with the leads? Do you separate the two?
Oh, yes, there's a clear distinction. So branding, honestly, is through brand surveys and share of voice and some of the social elements. Those are, kind of glossed over, frankly, in the C-suite, and it's all about quantifiable leads. Oh, it very much fits into that. I would say that's more on the earned side, quite honestly, and that's where it's incumbent upon us to work with you and forge those relationships and get into the conversation and bring you provocative opportunities to get our brand out in the market.
I actually have add to that. I have a particular perspective that if you lose traction in the earned part of the scheme of things, it impacts your ability to get brand advertising. Because if we don't feel that you have the same level of influence that perhaps you once had from an earned media standpoint, it colors our perspective from a branded and paid media standpoint. So I think there's a definite correlation.
Just to add to that, one of the things that we've done in order to try to get ASPs up and investment up is we give away brand studies, right, at a certain investment level, right? So not only does it drive investment up, but it also supports the brand study, because the more impressions you have out there, the more you're going to be able to drive success there. The other thing we've done, which marketers have loved, is showing exposed, unexposed engagement metrics. So what do people do on a marketer's site after having been exposed to certain ads? And what do they do when they're not exposed? And when you can show page view lift, visitation lift, conversion lift, it's the holy grail for them. They go to their CEO and say, I need more of this, right? Because look what's happening to my funnel because of it.
And speaking of more of this, we've used more than our fair share of time, so I have to be a good facilitator and say we got to get off the stage. So I want to thank everyone for listening. We'll be